In today's video, we'll take a look at ways you can read and write to files in C. So to start off, let's think about a simple problem. Let's say we have a struct. Here I'm going to define a simple struct just called point. And here I'm going to have inside this struct just two integers, x and y. So that those denote the position of that point, right? So there's my struct, and what I want is sort of to preserve the state of a variable of that type, basically. So I have a point, let's say here point, let's call it p1, and this guy has the values 12 and let's say -9, right? So I want this value to be preserved in a file and to be able to read it from that file using this same program. So what this program is going to do is going to write this point to a file and then read it and display it on the screen. That's all we have in mind for today. So there are at least two ways you can write to these files. First is just simple plain old text, right? You can write any type of text. You format it however you want with however delimiters, and it's going to be there. And when you open that file, it's going to be nice and fancy in any editor. Second way is to write in binary, quite literally taking the memory of or part of the memory of a program and copy and pasting it on the disk, on the hard drive or SSD or whatever you have it, basically on that file itself. Right, so when you open that, it's not going to be looking the same. In today's video, we'll take a look ways you can read and write to text files, right? Because this is already fairly complicated, and in the next video, we're going to take a look at binary files as well. So first things first, we have to define some file handles to open them for reading and writing, right? So simple enough. We can say here file with all caps, file pointer in, and file pointer out. What these are basically just sort of keys or handles, however you want to call them, to that file. It's just simply a number that they're going to store in here. Anyway, with these, we can basically open and close any file we want and read that and write to that using special functions. So first things first, let's open the file for writing, because we first want to write and then read it. So we're going to say fopen _s in my case, because I'm using a very recent compiler and also my editor is sort of forcing me to use the _s version of fopen. But if you don't have a recent compiler and it doesn't have this function, no worries, you can just use the fopen command like anybody else, right? So the first parameter is the actual place you want to store the handle. Where is that? Well, we have defined it here, right? And to denote a place in which we want to store a file pointer, we have to pass along a double pointer to file, to this type def here. So simple enough. All we do is just get the address of our out, because we first want to open the file for writing. Next up, second parameter is the file name. I'm going to call it point.dot. You can use any sort of extension here. Some people use bin, some people use b. You can even use txt. Windows or Linux doesn't even care. But I like to use that just to denote that, okay, there's some data in there that's important, not just a text file of nothing, right? And then the last parameter is the mode in which we want to open it. Well, here you can say, do I want to open it for reading or for writing? Basically, that's what it asks me. And what I want is to open it for writing. So I'm going to say W from write. Nice. Now, after we have opened this file, we should first check if it actually opened, because maybe it just wasn't allowed to create a file there or something like that, right? If you don't have permissions to do that, if your program doesn't have permissions to either create or write to this file, it's not going to work. How do we know that? Well, out, this guy is going to be 0 or null, So you can check that. You can say if out is null, then I'm just gonna return 1 here, right? So as you probably have seen from my previous video about the main function, I'm returning 0 here, it means it's successful, and 1 is just that something went wrong. We don't really specify what, but it's not really a problem for us right now. You might want to print something on the screen for your program, maybe. So now that we've checked, we can use this. We can use this out file handler to write to our file. So what do? We first want to write this p1, but you notice that p1 is actually a point. It's not a string. It's not a C string. So we have to first convert that to a C string. How do we do that? Simple. There's a function called, it's similar to Printf. Remember how Printf takes in a specifier and multiple variables and just kind of cobbles it together in a string. But that guy just prints it out on the console. Well, there's a variant of it that says, no, don't print that string on the console, save it somewhere for me. So to do that, we have to first define that somewhere. We have to first define those strings that we're going to use. So I'm going to define here a few buffers. So buffer in is going to be basically a C string of, or a char array of 256 characters, and buffer out with the same size. Right? No particular reason why I picked 256. You could have used anything you wanted. Okay, so now we can use that printf variant. We can say sprintf, and in my case I have to use the _s version, right? Same reason as before. And this guy takes in, first is the buffer. So simple enough, we need the buffer for outputting. That's why I call it out. We need the buffer count. So how big is that buffer? Well, we know it's 256 bytes long, so we're just gonna paste it in there. And then there's the format. Likewise with printf. So we have to say here a simple format in which we're gonna save this point. And I'm simply gonna use basically 2 integers separated by a comma, so that they look nice inside an editor, right? I'm gonna also add a \n at the end of the line. Nice. And then I just have to pass it the actual values. So I'm gonna have to say here p1.x and p1.y. So now we basically have created this string, which instead of %ds, it has the actual values on it, and it's saved inside buffer out. Now what we have to do is take this buffer out and send it to the file and write it there. How do we do that? Simple. We just use the fwrite function. It just takes in our buffer, so buffer out. Now here you can see that we have both, I know it's a bit small, but we have the element size and element count. Well, we're writing characters here, so we can say that the element size is just size of character, or literally just 1. And the element count is however many characters we have inside our string. Well, that's just strlen of buffer out, right? Because these numbers can be however many digits long they can be, so we don't know exactly, and we don't want to write the whole 256 or a buffer to the file, because there's no reason to do that, right? So just gonna limit it to this strlen. And the last parameter is of course the file handler that the file that we want to write to, which is out in our case, right? It's this guy that we have opened in the past. Now, if I try to run this, nothing happened, of course, because we didn't read anything, we didn't print out anything on the screen. But what I can do is go here on the resource files and add an existing item, and go here and say point.dat. And now this guy has been created, and if I click on it, you'll notice we get the string here on the screen, which is very, very, very nice. We get both x and y coordinates that we have saved here. So that's the first step. We have written to the file. Nice. Now, as this video is getting pretty long, I'm gonna actually split it into two parts, where we're gonna take a look at reading from this file that we have made in detail. So just to recap, right, what we have here is a point, which is a user-defined type, has just X and Y. We have two file handlers. We're using so far just the out one. We're not doing anything with this guy. So I have this out, which we open with fopen_s or fopen. You just kind of have to be careful with the parameters when you're using just fopen. It doesn't really need this guy. It actually returns the pointer instead of taking it as a parameter. But that's the only real difference there. Check if the file has been opened and created, of course. It's going to create it for you, as you might have noticed. I didn't really create it previously. This wasn't there. So once I wrote to it, it actually created it on the fly. So that's really nice. Don't forget to check this. Then to really write this string to the file, since we want a text file, we have to have some text. So we need this buffer out. On this buffer out, we use this special function called sprintf that basically formats it, as you can see. So from here onwards, it's like the parameters of printf. It formats this like printf, but it doesn't print it on the screen. What it does is instead outputs the formatted string to our buffer, right? So we now have a string that contains this cool format for our point. Basically represents the data inside our point variable. And then all we have to do is just call fwrite. And fwrite says, okay, well, let's write to this file. So you're just gonna say buffer out, size of char. So remember, the element size and element count doesn't really matter as long as they, when multiplied, they actually come to be as long, the amount of bytes you want to write from this buffer out, right? So this is, we're just writing characters here. And then lastly, the output file handler. And as a sort of good measure, we should actually check if we read, so files, or not files, bytes wrote here. This guy fwrite is going to return the number of bytes that it has written on the screen. So we can do simply here if bytes wrote equals, well, this many, right? Then we know that it's okay. So if it's not that, then we're going to just return 1, right? So if I try to run this again, we get again exited with code 0. So we know that it went here, so it didn't actually fail at this point. And also at the end here, we should also close the file using the fclose function here. We're just gonna give it the out file handler, right? So once we wrote all this, right before checking, I should really close this file, because otherwise it just stays there and is being opened. And then if I try to open it again for reading, for example, it's not gonna work. So just keep that in mind. And I'm doing this here before the checking because it's a possibility that we're not gonna read, or we're not gonna write everything to it. It's gonna return, and if it's here, we're no longer gonna close it. And you should always close your files. So thank you guys so much for watching. Be on the lookout for the next part of this video series. We're going to take a look at how to read this information, and then we're going to take a look at binary files themselves and what are the advantages and disadvantages between these two. So hope you got something out of it, and well, if you have any questions, do leave them down in the comments below or on our Discord server. Take care. Bye.